hard to doing it backwards when you're,
Yeah,
there we go.
there you go.
So everybody can see Walt.
That's right.
So my favorite biblical historian is a man called Bart Ehrman. Anybody ever hear of him? Who has written many books about early Christianity. Unlike so many theological tomes that are written in turgid, unintelligible prose that make for slow, plodding, and unfruitful reading, Bart's books are engaging and well-written. And in fact, some of them have appeared on the New York Times bestseller list, as if that's the be-all and end-all. But anyway, it gives you an indication that people read the books because they're readable. He also makes videos on YouTube that are equally interesting. So last Sunday, when I was recovering from my surgery, I spent some time listening to him on a video about the Ten Commandments. And in this video, Bart mentioned that there were not just 10 commandments. Who knew? There were 612 commandments. Now, I might have gotten the 12 wrong. It might have been 15. I can't remember. That went from the book of Exodus into Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. That's a lot of commandments. And he said that all of the commandments, from not taking God's name in vain to not wearing a garment sewn with 2 different types of fabric, were given equal weight by Judaism. And it was not just a special 10, it was a special 612. And so he said, if those who would post the commandments on the classroom walls wanted to really honor God, they needed to post all 612 and not just 10. Those who would post the commandments also fail to realize that 7 of the 10 do choose to, the 7 out of the 10 that they do choose to honor are property rather than moral laws. Not lying, stealing, committing adultery, coveting a male neighbor's wife, cow, pig, and house protected a householder from incursions from the outside. They did nothing to protect women, but rather provided recompense to her father, brother, son, uncle, or male cousin if she were assaulted. Protectionistic tendencies often led to theological sanctioned violence. In Numbers 34, God tells the Hebrews who are invading Palestine to drive out the inhabitants before you, else those whom you let remain shall be barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. And thorns in your sides. They shall trouble you in the land in which you are settling. Good political advice, bad theological practice. So, although Jesus might have known all 612 commandments, his take on them were very different. In one of his YouTube lectures, Bart, who journeyed from being a deeply committed evangelical, I'm sorry, to being an atheist, said the message of Jesus to his followers was breathtaking in scope, going far beyond anything that any of the commandments had to say. While other faiths and philosophies taught that believers must love their neighbor, they meant the neighbor who lived within their group and not strangers or outsiders. When Jesus, on the other hand, spoke about the blind, the sick, the oppressed, the injured, or the brokenhearted, he meant everyone. Hence his message of the Good Samaritan and the love of enemies. Jesus, a different aspect of Jesus from these other religious faiths is that he was particularly inclusive of women and counted them among his closest followers. So, too much of Jesus' message got lost once Christians placed Jesus in heaven at the right hand of God, stripping him of an already tenuous humanity. Worshipping him became far more important and much easier than paying attention to what he said and what he did. Heaven and personal salvation, atonement and sacrifice, rather than the creation of God's bountiful reign on earth, became the stated goal of Christianity. Original sin, promulgated by Augustine in the 5th century and not by Jesus in the 1st, excused human beings from improving the world. God wanted it this way, and so it was, and always will be. World without end, amen, became the mantra, although it was never, ever true. When we repeatedly do the same things and follow the same routine, which is very comforting, but what it does is it obscures what is underneath. As any faith matures, it takes on the accretions of the age, doctrine, dogma, and liturgical practices, politics, economics, and the powers of the time. So what happens when we take a stone and we throw it into the smooth pond of beliefs, the ones handed down by the church fathers rather than by Jesus? What questions might we ask? What answers might we get? What happens when we look at things from another angle? Here are some questions posed by somebody else who's worth following. Cameron Trimble, has anybody heard of her? She's amazing. She produces a column almost every day that you can read online, and it's short and sweet and beautiful, and you think, how could anybody do this? It's like Heather Cox Richardson in theology. Mm-hmm. But you can apply her questions to any issues, and I'm applying them to the commandments. So here they go. Who had the power to design and then enforce the commandments? You can answer in your head or out loud if you want. Who is protected by the 10 Commandments? Who is excluded by the commandments? Whose suffering is considered acceptable collateral damage by the commandments? What other stories are being suppressed by the commandments? So as we look back at those 612 commandments listed in the Hebrew Bible, detailing the necessary sacrifice of animals and people, I might add, and ascribe them to the Hebrew tribal God known as Yahweh, we should ask another question. What kind of God imposes the death penalty upon those who decide to wear clothing made of 2 fabrics or sows a field with 2 different kinds of seed? What kind of God empowers half of the world to regard the other half as inferior and stupid, the gateway of the devil? Certainly not God, the creator of the heavens and earth, the Abba God of Jesus. And Jesus rejected those commandments because they no longer made sense. God no longer speaks with that voice, if God ever did. And so here we are, left with the 10, the ones destined for the classroom walls, rules that seem straightforward until they are not. They are clanging cymbals without the tempering influence of the commandments of Jesus to be humble, to be merciful, to be clean of heart, meek, peaceful, and just. And the good news, because as we know there's always good news, is that the Spirit is the variable who can always change the equation. She is not constrained by anyone's past or future. She is not constrained by deeply held beliefs or violence or vindictive nature. She blows where she will, even as the powers try to contain her, like a genie in a bottle, to be sprinkled upon the faithful in careful, orthodox dollops of doctrine. The Spirit will always be who she will be, and she will untangle the truth from the myths and untruths spun by the powerful. And as our second reading states so profoundly, all things, including religious certainties, will one day be written in and spoken in a different voice. It has happened in the past, and it will happen again. It is the powers that will make you believe that things have never or will never change, and that it is a sin to question the misogynistic agenda of the men of the church. And as our first reading says, we need not obey an authority that will silence us. I'm going to say that again. We need not obey an authority that would silence us. Instead, we will stand tall as a community of equals and publicly unmask the great structural sins of racism, sexism, elitism, and economic injustice that supersede most of the commandments that the Orthodox would like to write on the classroom walls.